This is the Ancient and Medieval History lesson for Monday, the Thursday, the 14th of October, 2021. And the question at hand is, what makes up a human being? We have talked about the last of the man-like apes, Australopithecus taurensis, who has, among other things, the physical traits of opposable thumbs and binocular vision, which are human traits. We then talk about the first of the humans, Homo habilis, handyman, and not only does he retain the opposable thumbs and the binocular vision, but he uses both to become not a tool user. Animals use tools, but a tool maker. He actually crafts stone knives, among other things, which is not easy. When I was a kid, I tried. We had a lot of interesting geology in Connecticut, where I grew up, but it takes a long time to find the right rocks and to learn how to handle them. And I never made anything that was any good. I mean, unless you want, hit somebody in the right spot with it when throwing it, or put it in a slingshot like David. In general terms, this guy was much better at making hand tools by hand than I ever will be. Now we come to Homo erectus. Homo erectus retains the opposable thumbs and the binocular vision, but combines it with an upright stance. That upright stance permits him to be a tool wielder, a tool user, 24/7, 365, because walking around he can carry a stag, which if it's thin and pointy, can be a spear, which if it's clunky and heavy, can be a club. He can carry rocks, he can carry other things. So by being upright, we expand our handiness with these hands. Also, Homo erectus, by retaining the upright stance, places his sensory organs atop the tower that is our bodies, allowing us to see over the grass, perhaps, allowing us to see threats and opportunities sooner, which improves our survival chances. You see a big bear far off, you don't want to go near it, unless you are well armed and prepared to fight a bear. Some people are. But if you're not, or if you're just trying to do other things, maybe avoiding the bear is the right thing to do. And the first step to avoiding a bear is knowing of its existence, and knowing where it is, and therefore knowing how to avoid it. Homo erectus has a larger brain than either of the previous two. He's also bigger and more muscular. He has a bigger forebrain, still has the brow ridges, and is the most successful human species so far in terms of being a long-lasting model. Homo erectus appears about 1.8 million years ago and is around as recently as less than 100,000 years ago. Whether these guys are the basis for the goblin myths, I have no idea. It's possible they are. What we do know is that they master the use of fire. Fire is a huge deal. Fire brightens the night, warms the cold, cooks the food. Fire can be used for healing. If you have a massive flesh wound, you can take a torch and put fire to it. Now, that's cauterizing. It disinfects the wound and it seals it over. It's also incredibly painful. But it may be better than rotting, having your arm rot off with gangrene and maybe catching leprosy or having gangrene spread throughout your body or just dying in a slow, horrible way. Cauterizing the wound with fire is better than that. Fire is also useful as a weapon, both to drive off individual predators, because all land creatures fear fire because it burns, and also as, in modern terminology, a weapon of mass destruction. If this pad on the floor here represented a cliff edge, and the wind was coming from the whiteboards behind me, by placing fires here, here, and here, if the wind continues as we expect it to, the fire will spread in cone shapes outward until it forms an unbroken fire line, which will then continue to move with the wind until it reaches the cliff, at which point, hopefully, it'll burn out without spreading. If we pull this off, our hungry band of filthy primitive humans has meat rain, because those creatures that run off the cliff in a desperate desire to avoid burning to death won't all land in such a way that they're able to walk away. And so we can increase our food rather dramatically with the use of fire. Also, if there's an enemy tribe, we can try to employ fire against them. I'm sure it was done. But fire is a dangerous tool. Fire wants to eat oxygen and combustible matter. It has an innate ability to spread. It's almost a living thing. And if you use it and lose control of it, you yourself become its victim. Now, knowing how to use fire and knowing how to perpetuate fire by keeping a bit of fire around is not the same thing as knowing how to make fire. We're going to talk about this next week after the quiz. Making fire is actually a pretty difficult thing. But finding fire in nature, after a lightning storm, find a burning tree or something, and then keeping that fire alive in some kind of shielded lantern thingy, that is easier than developing the skills to use friction or flint to make fire. By using fire, Homo erectus was the first human ancestor to spread beyond Africa, out throughout the vast Eurasian continent, and even as far as Australia, or at least as far as Java, which is almost to Australia. So, extremely successful human ancestor who has the ability to use fire and walk upright. We talked a little bit about Neanderthal Man. Neanderthal Man is Homo sapiens Neanderthalensis. So, Homo Australopithecus afarensis, the great southern ape from afar. Homo habilis, handyman. Homo erectus, upright man. Homo sapiens is our species. Means thinking man. Sapiens, thinker. So, we are thinking man, Homo sapiens. But we have a subspecies, and it's not Neanderthalensis. Homo sapiens Neanderthalensis is the thinking man of the Neander Valley, which is in Germany, which is the first time that Neanderthal skeletons were identified as a distinct subspecies of human ancestor, of human being. Neanderthals actually have a larger brain than we do by cubic centimeters. By volume, bigger brain. But it's slightly different proportioned, with less of a forebrain, slightly less, and more of a midbrain. Homo sapiens Neanderthalensis also retains the eyebrow ridges to protect the skull. It has a thicker, stronger skeleton and a more barreled chest. They tend to be shorter than us, broader, built like a little wrestler, because they are Ice Age adapted human beings. Neanderthals thrive in the Ice Age Europe, at a time when Northern Europe was under ice sheets. Southern Europe was as cold or colder than Northern Europe is today. Neanderthals benefit from their sort of more squat, barrel-chested, muscular structure by keeping their organs deeper in their bodies. Those organs are less susceptible to the ravages of cold. Obviously, Neanderthals retain all the benefits that we've seen so far: binocular vision, opposable thumbs, upright stance. They're tool makers. They use fire. But they also do something which is genuinely thrilling to a religious believer like myself. The evolutionary record, the fossil record, and the record of artifacts all indicate that Neanderthals buried their dead with food that the living could eat, but wouldn't. With clothing the living could wear, but wouldn't. With weapons the living could use, but wouldn't.
How do we know that Erectus could use fire?
Because the records that we have, the fossil records, have Homo erectus bones both around with fire pits nearby. We have the charcoal and all things like that sort of in the sand. We also have evidence of Homo erectus with some burns, as if skeletons were thrown in the fire, or some Homo erecti were burned to death. The evidence also, I'm trying to guess, but I don't know, I'm guessing. Archaeologists or paleontologists or anthropologists, depending upon who's doing the study, might also have, by studying the garbage near Homo erectus skeletons and at that level, have determined that food was cooked. Don't ask me how. It may have to do with the skeletal remains of the animals and them showing signs of being cooked. For example, if you have a pig that dies in the woods and a pig that's roasted on a spit to make tasty, tasty meat, and if you've never had roast pig slowly cooked over a fire over a day or more, it's good. The skeletons are not going to appear the same. They're going to the pig that's roasted is going to have signs of that. So that's my guess. It is a logical assumption, but I'm not pretending that that's a fact. Does that make sense? Does anyone know more about that than I do? Okay. Burying the dead with gear and supplies that living people desperately need doesn't make sense. It's like that lady from California I told you about who insisted upon being buried in her late model Cadillac in her best dress with her jewelry, which she was. This is Egyptian pharaoh type stuff, because the pharaohs were certainly not buried with nothing. They were buried with gear to use in the afterlife. So the burial of Neanderthal corpses with all of this stuff and with flowers, we have the remnants of flowers, very strongly indicates that the Neanderthals had religious beliefs, that they believed in a happy hunting grounds where the dead would live forever or would live on, and a world that wasn't too different from ours, a world where weapons and tools, clothing and food would all be useful, and where flowers would be appreciated because they're beautiful. So, religion predates the modern human species. Now, the last group of people to come out of Africa fairly recently. They are Homo sapiens sapiens. Thinking man. That's us. Saying thinking is not enough for us. We are thinking men, as opposed to just thinking men. Homo sapiens sapiens, our subspecies, have taller, thinner frames, a domed skull that lacks brow ridges, a very large forebrain, that is the brain above your eyes, where you keep your personality and your memory. It is easier to kill us in terms of just physical toughness than it would be, say, to kill a Neanderthal. We are tall and willowy, whereas the Neanderthals are barrel-chested and squat. But we have the last evolutionary development, the last physical change that makes human beings change based on a physical metamorphosis. Most creatures have their mouth and their nose and tubes leading from them to their lungs and to their stomach. But they don't fully connect after the mouth. So you got tubes going down to the stomach, you got tubes going down to the lungs, and as long as you don't block them up in the mouth, the creature is unlikely to choke. Our subspecies, very recently, within the last 50,000, probably 25,000 years, develops a fully articulated voice box. Something the Neanderthals didn't have. They may have had it partially articulated, but not a fully. So our food and breathing tubes rejoin one another in the neck and then separate out again. This increases our risk of choking. And as somebody who has almost choked to death on more than one occasion, I can tell you it's not fun. It really, really, really isn't. However, what this fully articulated voice box with vocal cords does is it allows us to precisely and with great scope sculpt sound. There are just over 50 phonemes, different sounds that the human mouth can make by pushing air through the voice box in different ways, by moving the tongue and the teeth and the jaws in different ways, by playing around with air pressure. They include phonemes that we don't use in our language. That sound is used by the Bushmen of the Kalahari, including the Goom tribe. So if you were to listen to Bushmen talking, they would sound unusual to an English speaker because you just get the sense that they're using this sound that can be made by a human mouth that we just don't use in our language. Now, we use sounds that, say, the Japanese don't use. There aren't many Japanese names that have L sounds in them, because L is not a traditional sound used in the Japanese language. So if your name was Blackthorn, they would pronounce it, unless they were very good at English, Barakthorn, rather than Blackthorn, because they have R's, and the R is, to them, a close approximation of our L. But it doesn't sound the same. Haro, Barakthorn. And this is true of many East Asian or Oriental languages. There isn't a great use of L's. Now, my name in German is Rolf. They use a rolling R. The Spaniards use a rolling R also. I'm trying to think of a Spanish word that uses the rolling R. Can any of you Spanish students think of one? Yeah.
My last name.
Granado? Okay. So, and in English, you don't see people going, I'm going to the grocery store. It isn't like that. Hey, Rolf, come over here. I have German friends who've called me that, but not American friends, not English friends. We use the R differently. Ralph. Granado, not Granado. Great, thank you. Um, the Germans use sounds, several sounds that we don't use. And they have a very precise sound that's approximated in English, in written English, by an OE, or by an O with two dots over it. Like the fat leader of Hitler's Air Force, Hermann Goering, Goering, Danke schön. Not all languages use every phoneme. We have 26 letters in our alphabet. We use probably, if you count hard A's and soft A's, long vowels and short vowels, I think we use in the low 30s in English, standard American English, for phonemes. What happens with the voice box is the creation of language. And language is the key. Language is what separates us from all the other species. The Neanderthals had a larger brain, and they probably had a gesture language. They probably had more than basic communication of raw emotion. They probably had some variant of sign language. But it's not a complete language. It's use gestures, like you see in a pidgin language, where you have dock workers who are Chinese and they're working with English speakers. So you end up with what's called a pidgin or a patois, which is sort of a language that mixes both languages but is neither. Rook-see pidgin is what it was called back in the China Navy. Look-see pidgin. Look, see how somebody does something, do it by rote memory without understanding. So the voice box, by giving us this ability to sculpt sound in the ways that we do, gives us the ability to develop spoken language. Spoken language is what frees us from this prison of meat and bone that our brain is otherwise in. Without language, how isolated are you? If you ever go to a foreign land that does not speak American English or even British English, you'll learn just how important language is. If you have friends from overseas or family members who travel, they will tell you secondhand just how difficult it is to be surrounded by people who you can't understand and who can't understand you. That's a big problem. Donde está el baño? Is my understanding of how to say in Espanol, where's the bathroom? It's a rather important thing to be able to ask if you're in a foreign city. By the way, if you are a Spanish speaker and you know a better way of asking that, tell me. Because I may get stuck somewhere where I need it. Okay, apparently it's good enough. Or you just want to see me at some point in the future in Spain or Mexico somewhere looking very uncomfortable. ¿Dónde está el baño? ¿Dónde está el biblioteca? Where's the library? Or where's the bookstore? I think it's library. No.
I think it's library.
Yeah. That was the first phrase I learned in high school Spanish. For whatever reason, this teacher had to start with ¿Dónde está el biblioteca? Or la biblioteca. Because, of course, libraries are feminine, not masculine. You have to ask yourself how Romance languages handle the whole gender fluid thing that we're experimenting with in our society today. I mean, English does not assign a gender to a bottle or to an ID tag or to a camera or to lights. Spanish does. Latin does. There is no neuter gender. In any event, with language, our development is no longer a matter of physical evolution over tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands or millions of years. With the development of language, which happens around 14 or 15,000 years ago, we now have the ability to rapidly communicate. If language starts 14 or 15,000 years ago, it's only 5,000 years from then until we develop the first farms. It's only 10,000 years from then that we develop the first civilizations. 15,000 years from then, it's the time of Christ and the Roman Empire. 17,000 years ago, that's today, looking back. 16 or 17,000. Give or take. Who's counting? Language makes the history of human beings less the history of how our bodies get enough calories to eat, and more what we think about the world, how we make meaning of things, what we believe, what we think is worth living for, dying for, or killing for. What separates the study of history from the study of all other past things, archaeology, anthropology, paleontology, is that history deals only with written language societies. You can't have history without written language that you can read. So we develop language, and in so short a time, we go from living like animals, traveling around, hunting and gathering, to building rocket ships to the moon, a global internet, electrical power, curing polio, and dozens or hundreds or thousands or even millions of other inventions, large and small, that change how we live our lives, how long we live on this earth, and all the other things. This language thing is the key to humanity, and it's the last thing we develop. Now, there's one of the traits that I have not talked about, and that trait is something that's happening all along. It is the growing brain. What advantages or disadvantages evolutionarily are there to we ape-descended primitives, according to evolutionary theory, developing a big brain, big enough to be aware of its own existence, big enough to be aware of its own mortality, big enough to plan and imagine and dream things that never were, and then maybe even try to make them happen. The advantages of a big brain, of a growing brain like we have, if you were to ask a person what's their most important organ, if they're really thinking about it, they'll say their brain. But look what organ is telling you that. Think about it. The brain allows us to dream. In fact, a human being that doesn't dream goes insane. We need to dream. Our brain, our mind, brain is the physical matter, mind is more than the sum of its parts. Our mind needs to play freely. Don't ask me why. I could give you ideas, but what we know is if you prevent a human being from dreaming, they become psychotic. When you torture someone, you deprive them of decent sleep, pushing them towards that psychotic break so that you can get information from them. You break their mind in order to see what's inside. I know this because I study history, which includes torture and brainwashing techniques. With our brains. You say so?
Just saying you study.
I'm also teaching certain things about torture, so if you pay attention, you'll know more about how to do it than you would if you had another teacher.
So I can use some of these methods on my brother?
No, but you could. It would be wrong, though, so don't. Here's what I learned how to do today. Yeah, yeah. Ah! Mr. Gennaro was such a good teacher. A big brain is what we have behind the language. We can have the ability to make sounds, sculpt them, but without something to say, it's all just noise. So how do I have it written in here? I'm forgetting. The growing brain gives us memory, the ability to retain knowledge of the past. How do you think it's possible for human beings to get cats to go to the vet? Because cats don't clearly remember everything. Oh, they'll remember what the kitty carrier looks like and what it's for. Our cats do not like the kitty carrier because the only time we use the kitty carriers is either when we're flying across the country to move from Maine to Idaho, or to take them to the vet. And the vet is never fun. They probe you, they pinch you, they give you shots, they look at your teeth. It's just in a stranger, and the place smells like dog. And cats don't like dogs if they're not used to them. So we have memory. We have the ability to recall information from the past that will help us make wiser decisions, like that fire thing. You stick your hand in the fire once, the pain of it will remind you for the rest of your life, as long as you retain memory, not to touch fire. We have thought. We have the ability to create artifices, artificial structures in our minds. These thoughts can be models of how the universe works, wondering, does the Earth revolve around the sun? Does the sun revolve around the Earth? It can involve wondering how to train your dog or your brother. It can involve wondering how you are going to deal with certain problems, or what you did right and wrong the last time you dealt with certain problems. So memory and thought are somewhat different. Thought is the direct application of logic and reason. Among other things, memory is recalling things, remembering and recalling. There are many things I remember that I have difficulty recalling, because memory is a big part of what I do. But I do have some ways of getting information from the back of my mind where it's stored to the front of my mind where I can use it. Creativity comes from our growing brains. And again, this is the ability to imagine things that never were and try to make them happen. To come up with new and unprecedented ways of living, being, speaking, or doing. Not all creatures are creative. Not all societies value creativity. We are one that does. Traditionally, Americans have done very well in races for technology and research because we are encouraged to think as individuals. And we're not punished if we think differently than everyone else, as long as our different thoughts don't involve us using bayonets to juggle babies. That sort of thing we frown upon. And civilization is a product of the human mind. This idea that we develop a language so that paper, glasses, bald, all of these things mean something because we all remember what they mean. The symbolic logic of language comes from memory and thought, and you put all of this together and you get human civilization. You don't belch at the dinner table in front of your grandparents. You belch maybe if you're with the guys, and you want to be gross, like guys often are when civilizing influences are not around. All of these things that make up a civilization are products of our mind as well as our emotions. Now, here's something that most people don't consider. What is the downside of having a big mind? I'm going to see if I can find this. I haven't shown it in a while. It's pretty sharp. Would people in back please close the shades and shut the fan off? Let's see if I can find it. What it is a scene from a show that I think is called Blue Planet. And it's going to show killer whales doing some very disturbing things. I'm going to pause the video for those of you at home, because God forbid I violate anyone's copyright. I'll open it up again when we're done. What we just saw was not from what I thought, Big Blue Planet. It was from BBC Earth, and it was of a pod of killer whales hunting sea lion pups, sea lion babies. Basically, sea lions give birth, and little sea lions grow up on the beach, and then they've got to go into the ocean. And the killer whales know when they're going to do that, so they wait, and they basically throw themselves onto the beach to capture sea lions. And when sea lions have to go into the water, they have to get past these killer whales, and it's basically a gauntlet of death. Now, that isn't a bad thing. As animal life goes, all predators engage in killing their food. We do. Beef doesn't come from nowhere. So, what's unusual is what we saw at the end, which is a single killer whale playing with his food. But not like a cat. Cats play with their food by letting the mouse think it's going to go, and then bam, and pulling him back, letting him think. And what a cat is doing is honing his reflexes. What these killer whales would do, and did, is they would toss the seal. They would flip it with their tail, like the seal that they'd just eaten was a ball. And what you didn't see, the scene I wanted to show you, had I been more prepared, I would have shown you, is of killer whales taking a baby gray whale and throwing it back and forth as if it was a weird game of catch or volleyball. Sometimes as the baby whale came in, a killer whale would flip its tail up and knock it back. The baby whale was still alive at the beginning of the process. That's cruelty. That's not an animal innocently playing with its food. That's not an animal feeding. That is cruelty. And that is the product of the big brain. Dolphins have been recorded. Dolphins are interested in people. People are often interested in dolphins. But when female oceanographers began diving into the seas in the 1970s in larger and larger numbers, something incredibly disturbing began to happen. Male dolphins would often surround and isolate a female diver and rub up against her in a way that was absolutely and unmistakably sexual. I'm not joking. I'm not making this up. You can't make things like this up. Why would dolphins do that? And big brain. It was fun for the dolphins to do that. It wasn't about procreation. It wasn't in any way natural, in accordance with the laws of nature. It was an unnatural aggression akin to a sexual assault because they thought it was fun. Big brain overrides instinctive programming. Some killer whales go rogue. Killer whales, like early human beings, are hunter-gatherers, hunters really. And they travel in groups, and the women are the camp, and the men, when they reach maturity, leave the camp and they go find another group. This preserves the health, the genetic health of the pod. Some males, most actually, go off and they find another group of females. They find another pod. They're accepted in as one of the males. The women are the camp. The men range out and protect the camp and deal with things. And early humans did the same thing. But some killer whales never find females or choose not to. They instead team up with gangs of other male killer whales that are unattached. Their language changes. Their whale song is distinctly different. And they are cannibals. They hunt other killer whales. Now, this is also not a survival trait. This is not normal animal behavior. This is evil. Chimpanzees, to the horror of Dr. Jane Goodall, the great researcher in East Africa, chimpanzees in the 1990s, she discovered groups of chimps that she had studied since the 1950s went to war with one another. They waged a low-grade war between different groups of chimps until things were resolved. I'm not talking occasional fighting. I'm not talking male threat behavior in order to impress the ladies. I'm talking groups of chimps that don't have any immediate cause to be angry at one another, going after one another to try to kill them or wound them or defeat them. I won't even get into detail with the catalog of human psychopaths, of human crime. The biggest downside of our brains is that we override our instinctive programming. Our instinctive programming tells us how to live. We eat, we breed, we do all the other things that living things need to do, and we come together to help one another do that. That's in our nature. We are social creatures. But some of us go rogue. Some of us become cannibals. Some of us become psychopathic murderers. There are all sorts of things that are against nature that people choose to do. This is going to be very unpolitically correct. There is no survival strategy benefit to homosexuality. In terms of breeding, it is against nature. You may think culturally it's acceptable, even normal, that's fine. That's certainly the way modern people look at it. But from a purely biological perspective, homosexuality doesn't make sense in that you are expending energy to breed with someone you cannot breed with. Maybe it's a reaction to overpopulation. I've heard that idea posited. Maybe there is some sense that we have overpopulated the world and that if human beings need love, which we do, and need connection, which most of us do, then that type of relationship might actually reduce global population by reducing birth rates. I don't know. I am not saying it's evil or wrong. I am saying that from a biological point of view, it does not seem to be a survival strategy. With a large brain, we, whales, elephants, chimpanzees, all have been caught doing nothing other than evil. Some elephants are murderous. Some whales are. Some dolphins are. Some people are. Some chimpanzees are. We have the ability, with our intelligence, to override all of the natural restraints that we have and all of the natural tendencies that we have to choose something else. And with the capacity to choose comes the capacity for great crime and great evil. And that is the big downside of having the big brain. We are not safe. Human beings are capable of anything because we're intelligent enough to say, nah, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to be this way. And to be that way. And sometimes that way is a new wonderful thing. You got Moses, you got Jesus, you got other people doing things that other people just didn't understand, and they've made the world a better place. But you also have the mass murderers, so I'm not going to dignify by naming them. Also, arguably biologically, developing hydrogen bombs, super germs, and mustard gas were not survival strategies either, because these weapons, if they are used profligately, will bring about the end of human civilization and possibly, in the case of the hydrogen bomb or a super germ, no, the hydrogen bomb mainly, the end of all life on Earth. We could do that if we wanted to. The sick thing is there are people who think it would be interesting. There are people who would happily see the world burn if only they could be assured of ruling over the ashes. That's scary. We are the scariest thing in the universe that we know of. You don't need angels or demons. You don't need saints or mass. You have saints or mass murderers. You have people who choose good and people who choose evil. And there are animals that do the same thing. And there's no question in my mind, looking at that whale playing with its food, that whale is engaged in willful cruelty. That is evil. That's not simply an animal doing its thing. Tomorrow you have a quiz on all this stuff. So thank you for your attention. Be ready for it and have a good day.